The fluorescent lights of room 304 buzzed like a dying wasp. Serena cradled her splintered forearm, praying the shadow stepping through the doorway was the nurse. Instead, the tailored suit and piercing dark eyes belonged to the one man she never wanted to see again, her ex-fiancé. The emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital was a chaotic symphony of human suffering. But inside exam room 304, the silence was suffocating. Serena sat on the edge of the crinkling paper covering the exam table, her breath hitching every time a fresh wave of agony radiated from her left arm. The bone wasn't just broken, it was shattered, a spiral fracture of the radius, the attending physician, Dr. Harrison, had muttered with a grimace before stepping out to order a cast. Serena closed her eyes, her rich, deep brown skin pale and clammy from the shock. She was 28, a woman who had spent the last 2 years building a fortress around her life, only to have it violently kicked down in a single evening. She mentally tallied the lies she would tell the police when they inevitably arrived to ask about the accident. I fell down the stairs at the brownstone. I tripped over a rug. The usual script. The script Nathaniel expected her to read. Then, the heavy wooden door clicked shut. Serena didn't look up immediately. Doctor? Harrison, I really don't need the heavy painkillers. Just wrap it. Harrison was reassigned to the ICU, a voice said. Serena's heart stopped. The voice was smooth, deceptively quiet, and layered with the kind of absolute authority that made powerful men sweat. She snapped her head up, ignoring the blinding flash of pain in her arm. Standing against the closed door was Gabriel. He was a striking man of Korean descent, his sharp, aristocratic features framed by impeccably styled dark hair. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than a Midwestern home, the fabric stretching slightly over his broad shoulders. To the elite of Manhattan, Gabriel was a venture capitalist, a titan of industry who operated out of a glass tower in the financial district. To the underground, he was the undisputed boss of the city's most ruthless organized crime syndicate, a man who had inherited a shattered empire and rebuilt it with cold, calculating precision. And to Serena, he was the man she had abandoned at the altar 24 months ago. Gabriel, she breathed, the name tasting like ash on her tongue. What are you doing here? He didn't answer right away. His dark, impenetrable eyes scanned her, taking in the disheveled state of her usually immaculate natural curls, the tear tracks cutting through the makeup on her cheeks, and finally, the grotesque, swollen angle of her left forearm resting on her lap. When his gaze locked onto her injury, the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees, a muscle feathered in his jaw. I own the medical supply company that outfits this hospital, Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave. When an alert goes out with your social security number, it gets flagged directly to my personal server. A failsafe I instituted the day you vanished. He stepped closer, the faint scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco washing over her. It was a scent that used to mean safety. Now, it just meant danger. I told you never to look for me, Serena said, trying to inject venom into her voice, but it came out as a fragile whisper. She pressed her back against the wall. You need to leave. If he finds you here, Gabriel stopped a foot away from her. The imposing height of him cast a long shadow over the exam table. If who finds me here? Nobody. It was an accident. I fell. Gabriel let out a low, dark chuckle that held absolutely no humor. He reached out, his warm, calloused fingers gently ghosting over the bruised, unbroken skin just above her elbow. Serena shivered, a traitorous tear slipping down her cheek at the tenderness of the touch. A spiral fracture requires a high-impact twisting force, Gabriel stated clinically, his eyes locked onto hers. It doesn't happen from a simple fall. Someone grabbed your arm and twisted it until the bone snapped. His gaze hardened, the veneer of the polished businessman peeling away to reveal the ruthless syndicate boss underneath. Give me a name? Gabriel, please, she begged, her voice cracking. You don't understand what's happening. You can't be involved in this. I am already involved, he replied softly. He pulled a sleek burner phone from his breast pocket and tapped a single button. Bring the car to the private loading dock. We are leaving. I'm not going anywhere with you, Serena protested, trying to slide off the table, but the sudden movement sent a sickening jolt through her radius. She gasped, doubling over. Before she could hit the floor, Gabriel caught her, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. He was solid, immovable, and for a split second, Serena wanted nothing more than to bury her face in his shoulder and weep. You don't get a vote tonight, Querida, he murmured, his breath brushing her ear. You walked away from me once to play the martyr. I let you go because I thought you were safe. But looking at your arm, his grip tightened fractionally, his voice vibrating with a lethal promise. The rules have changed. Now, we do this my way. The door swung open, but it wasn't the police. It was two men in tailored suits, Gabriel's personal security. They flanked the hallway, ensuring no nurses or doctors intervened as Gabriel simply lifted Serena into his arms, completely bypassing hospital protocol, the law, and her protests. As he carried her down the sterile corridor toward the freight elevator, Serena realized with a sinking dread that she was no longer running from her past. She had just been kidnapped by it. The ride in the armored Maybach was a suffocating blur of silence and adrenaline. Rain lashed against the tinted windows as they sped down the FDR drive, the city lights bleeding into streaks of neon. Gabriel sat beside her, rigid and silent, a glass of amber liquid in his hand that he never drank. Serena held an ice pack a nurse had hastily shoved into Gabriel's hand before they disappeared, the cold numbing the worst of the throbbing in her arm. They arrived at a monolithic skyscraper at 56 Leonard Street in Tribeca. The private elevator shot them directly to the penthouse, a sprawling, modern fortress of floor-to-ceiling glass, dark wood, and steel. It was a place Serena had never seen. He had bought it after she left him. Gabriel guided her to an oversized leather sofa in the center of the living room. Sit, he commanded gently. Within minutes, a private physician, a discreet, gray-haired man named Dr. Evans, arrived with a portable X-ray machine and a medical kit. Gabriel stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the storm over the Hudson River while Dr. Evans set the bone and wrapped Serena's arm in a sleek, lightweight fiberglass cast. She will need rest, Mr. Ahn, Dr. Evans said, packing his equipment, and a prescription for the pain. I'll leave the bottles on the counter. The bone is set cleanly, but the psychological trauma of such an assault, she shouldn't be left alone. She won't be, Gabriel said without turning around. Once the heavy oak door clicked shut behind the doctor, the penthouse fell dead silent, save for the patter of rain against the glass. Serena huddled into the corner of the sofa, suddenly feeling incredibly small in the cavernous room. Gabriel finally turned. He walked over to the sprawling kitchen island, poured a glass of water, and brought it to her along with 2 white pills. Take these. Serena accepted the pills with her good hand, swallowing them dry. She refused to look at him. Gabriel sat on the heavy oak coffee table directly in front of her, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The proximity forced her to look at him. Up close, she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the subtle tension in his jaw. 2 years, Serena, he said, his voice a low, rough rumble. You packed a single suitcase, left your engagement ring on the nightstand, and vanished into thin air. You changed your name. You changed your career. I tore this city apart looking for you, but you covered your tracks like a professional. I had to, she whispered, staring at the floor. Because you stopped loving me? No, she said instantly, the truth slipping out before she could catch it. She squeezed her eyes shut, cursing her vulnerability. Gabriel exhaled a long breath. Then look at me and tell me who broke your arm. His name is Nathaniel, Serena said, her voice trembling. Nathaniel Pierce. Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly, a terrifying stillness settling over him. The managing director at Vanguard Equities? Serena's head snapped up in shock. You know him? I know everyone who moves large sums of money in my city, Gabriel said coldly. Vanguard Equities is a front. It's a sophisticated money laundering hub for the Korsakov Syndicate, the Russian faction that has been trying to usurp my supply chains in the ports for the last 6 months. Gabriel stood up, pacing the length of the rug, his mind clearly putting the pieces together at terrifying speed. You left me. You hid, and then you wound up dating a mid-level money launderer for my biggest rival. That is a statistical impossibility, Serena. You didn't just meet him at a coffee shop. Serena looked away, biting her lips so hard she tasted copper. Look at me, Gabriel barked, the sudden volume making her jump. He was back in front of her in a second, crouching down, his hands gripping the arms of the sofa, trapping her in. His dark eyes were blazing with a mixture of fury and desperate realization. Did you go to him on purpose? Yes, Serena cried out, the dam finally breaking. Tears spilled over her lashes. Yes, I did. 2 years ago, your father's old consigliere came to me. He told me the Russians were building a massive federal case against you, feeding information to the FBI through Vanguard. He said if I stayed with you, I would be the weakness they used to break you. They threatened my sister. They threatened you. Gabriel froze, his face draining of color. You left to protect me? I left to get inside Vanguard, Serena sobbed, her good hand gripping the lapel of his expensive suit. I spent 2 years building a fake persona, getting hired there as an analyst, and getting close to Nathaniel. He kept the primary ledger, the one that proves the Korsakovs are the ones laundering the money, not your organization. I had it, Gabriel. I finally downloaded it onto a flash drive tonight. And Nathaniel caught you, Gabriel finished, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper. He caught me transferring the files. He went insane. He grabbed my arm, demanding to know who I was working for. She shivered violently at the memory. When I wouldn't tell him, he twisted it until it snapped. I managed to hit him with a desk lamp and run. I went to the hospital because I didn't know where else to go. Gabriel slowly stood up. The look on his face was one Serena had only seen in rumors, the face of the ruthless predator who had conquered the city's underworld. There was no warmth left in his eyes, only a cold, infinite void. Where is the drive now? He asked. In my coat pocket. She pointed to the blood-stained trench coat Gabriel's men had discarded on a nearby chair. Gabriel walked over, retrieved the silver flash drive, and slipped it into his pocket. He then pulled out his phone, dialing a number. He didn't wait for a greeting. Assemble the extraction team, Gabriel ordered into the phone, his voice devoid of all human emotion. Lock down Vanguard equities and find Nathaniel Pierce. I don't care if he is in a police station, a church, or a bunker. Bring him to the warehouse on Pier 40 and make sure he arrives breathing. I want to handle him personally. He hung up the phone and looked back at Serena. You saved my empire, Serena. Now, I am going to show you exactly what happens to a man who lays a hand on my queen. The storm that battered Manhattan showed no signs of breaking by the time Gabriel's matte black SUV pulled up to the rusted corrugated steel doors of Warehouse 7 on Pier 40. Inside, the cavernous space smelled of brine, motor oil, and raw, palpable fear. Gabriel stepped out of the vehicle, his charcoal suit absorbing the dim, flickering halogen light overhead. He adjusted his cuffs with terrifying, meticulous precision. His men, a dozen silent, heavily armed operatives, parted like the Red Sea as he walked toward the center of the room. Bound to a reinforced steel chair beneath a single, blinding spotlight, sat Nathaniel Pierce. Nathaniel, the polished Vanguard Equities director who wore Brioni suits and drank 30-year-old Macallan, looked completely broken. His expensive tie was gone, his lip was split, and his eyes darted wildly around the warehouse, taking in the men who held suppressed submachine guns with practiced ease. But when his eyes finally landed on Gabriel, all the color drained from his face. Gabriel on, Nathaniel stammered, his voice cracking. He tried to puff out his chest, clinging to a pathetic shred of Wall Street arrogance. You're making a colossal mistake. Do you have any idea who I work for? Yuri Korsakov will rain hell down on this city if you touch me. Gabriel didn't say a word. He slowly walked forward, the sharp click-clack of his Italian leather shoes echoing off the concrete. He stopped 2 feet away from Nathaniel, pulling the silver flash drive from his pocket. He held it up between his index and middle finger, letting the spotlight catch the metal. Nathaniel's bravado shattered instantly. He lunged against the zip ties, cutting into his wrists, his breath hitching. Where did you get that? You made 2 fatal errors tonight, Nathaniel, Gabriel began, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it commanded the dead silence of the entire warehouse. First, you assumed this drive was your insurance policy. Second, you put your hands on the woman who belongs to me. Serena? Nathaniel choked out, genuine confusion mingling with his terror. She's an entry-level analyst. She's a nobody. She's. Gabriel moved faster than a striking viper. His hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around Nathaniel's throat with crushing, unyielding force. He didn't squeeze hard enough to kill, but just enough to cut off the airflow, watching impassively as Nathaniel's eyes bulged and his face turned a mottled, bruised purple. Her name, Gabriel said softly, leaning in so close that Nathaniel could see his own terrified reflection in Gabriel's dark eyes, is Serena On. She is my fiancée. And you shattered her radius. Gabriel released him, letting Nathaniel gasp violently for air, coughing up a string of blood and saliva onto the concrete. I'm going to dismantle you, Nathaniel, Gabriel continued, pulling out an iPad and handing it to his lead enforcer, a towering man named Elias. But I am not a savage. Let's look at your portfolio. Elias tapped the screen, and a live feed of offshore banking accounts appeared. Cayman Islands, Geneva, Cyprus, Gabriel listed clinically. $50 million in laundered Korsakov money under your direct management. And another $5 million you've been quietly skimming off the top for your own retirement in the Maldives. Did Yuri know you were stealing from him? Nathaniel began to openly weep. Please, please, God, don't tell him. I don't need to, Gabriel said, tapping the screen himself. I just transferred every single cent of the Korsakov syndicate's money into an untraceable crypto wallet, and I left a digital trail pointing directly to your personal IP address at Vanguard. By tomorrow morning, Yuri Korsakov won't just want you dead. He will want to flay you alive. You are erased, Nathaniel. Your money, your reputation, your life. You're dead too, Nathaniel screamed, spitting blood, his mind breaking under the realization of his absolute ruin. You think you're untouchable, On? You think you own this city? Yuri didn't set this trap alone. We had the blueprint to your entire organization handed to us on a silver platter. Gabriel froze. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to plummet. He signaled Elias, who stepped back. Explain, Gabriel demanded, his tone turning to jagged ice. 2 years ago, Nathaniel hyperventilated, the words spilling out in a desperate bid for survival. We couldn't get near you. Your security was too tight. But your father's old consigliere, he came to Yuri. He wanted to take over your empire. But he knew as long as you had her, as long as you had Serena grounding you, you were invincible. He told Yuri that if they scared her away, you would become reckless. You would make mistakes. A sickening dread coiled in Gabriel's stomach. The puzzle pieces violently snapped into place. Serena hadn't just been threatened by an anonymous mobster. She had been manipulated by the one man Gabriel trusted implicitly with his life, his finances, and his family's legacy. Donovan Sterling, Gabriel breathed, the name tasting like poison. Yes, Nathaniel cried. Donovan. He fed us the port schedules. He fed us the police patrol routes. And he's the one who told us about the flash drive tonight. He called me 10 minutes before Serena tried to steal it. He said, if I caught her, I should kill her and frame the Russians to start a war he could finish. Gabriel's heart stopped. The world tilted on its axis. Donovan knew about the flash drive. Donovan knew Serena was alive. Gabriel ripped his phone from his pocket, dialing the direct line to the penthouse security detail at 56 Leonard Street. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. It went straight to voicemail. Elias, Gabriel ordered, his voice suddenly stripped of all its calm, replaced by a raw, feral panic. Burn this warehouse to the ground with him inside. Every man to the vehicles. Now, high above the rain-slicked streets of Tribeca, Serena sat rigidly on the edge of the leather sofa. The painkillers Dr. Evans had given her were thick and heavy, pulling at the edges of her consciousness, but her adrenaline refused to let her sleep. Her left arm, encased in the sleek fiberglass cast, throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. The penthouse was deadly quiet. Gabriel's men were stationed outside the front door and in the private elevator lobby. She was supposed to be safe. She had done it. She had secured the ledger, protected Gabriel, and survived. So why did she feel like she was being hunted? Suddenly, the soft, ambient lighting of the penthouse flickered. The digital thermostat on the wall blinked twice, then went completely dark. The hum of the central air conditioning died. Serena sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She grabbed the heavy glass tumbler from the coffee table with her good right hand. Hello? She called out, her voice swallowed by the sheer size of the living room. A heavy, metallic thunk echoed from the foyer. It was the sound of the biometric locks on the private elevator being manually overridden. Serena didn't wait. 2 years of living undercover, constantly looking over her shoulder, had honed her survival instincts to a razor's edge. She slipped off the sofa, her bare feet silent on the Persian rug, and darted behind the massive marble kitchen island just as the elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. Heavy footsteps entered the foyer, not the synchronized professional tread of Gabriel's security team. These were heavy, tactical boots. Sweep the perimeter, a raspy voice ordered. Find her. And remember, Mr. Sterling wants her alive just long enough to record a message for Gabriel. Serena clamped her hand over her mouth, stifling a gasp. Sterling. Donovan Sterling. The memories rushed back with blinding clarity. Donovan's face etched with faux sympathy in that dimly lit diner 2 years ago. Gabriel is blind to the threat, Serena. The Russians are coming. If you love him, you have to disappear. It's the only way to save him. He had played her. He had used her love for Gabriel to orchestrate a coup. And now he was here to finish the job. Serena, my dear, Donovan's smooth, aristocratic voice drifted through the penthouse. He sounded entirely too casual, like a man browsing an art gallery. There is no point in hiding. The building's security grid is offline, and Gabriel's guards in the hallway have been permanently relieved of duty. It's just us. Serena pressed her back against the cold marble of the island. She scanned her surroundings desperately. The kitchen knives were locked in a magnetic block on the counter, too exposed. The balcony doors were 20 feet away, but it was a 60-story drop to the street. I have to admit, I'm impressed, Donovan continued, his footsteps slowly clicking across the hardwood floor, drawing closer to the kitchen. 2 years deep undercover at Vanguard. You played Nathaniel like a cheap fiddle, but you were always too smart for your own good. You should have stayed dead, Serena. You coming back tonight ruins a very delicate timeline I've spent years crafting. He was inches from the edge of the island. Serena could see the shadow of his suppressed pistol stretching across the floor. She had a split second to act. Grabbing a heavy cast iron skillet from the lower rack with her right hand, Serena shoved the island's rolling utility cart outward with her foot. It slammed into the legs of one of the mercenaries, sending him stumbling backward with a shout. Serena lunged from her cover, sprinting toward the master hallway. Grab her, Donovan barked. A hand clamped down on her shoulder, spinning her around violently. The mercenary raised the butt of his rifle to strike her, but Serena swung the cast iron skillet with every ounce of desperate strength she had. It connected with the side of the mercenary's head with a sickening crunch, dropping him to the floor. But the momentum threw her off balance. She stumbled, and before she could recover, Donovan was there. He didn't use his gun. Instead, he reached out and viciously grabbed her left arm right over the fresh fiberglass cast. Serena let out a blood-curdling scream as white-hot agony exploded up her shoulder, dropping her to her knees. The painkillers were useless against the sheer torque he applied. Such a fighter, Donovan sneered, standing over her, twisting the cast, just enough to keep her paralyzed with pain. He pointed the barrel of his pistol directly between her eyes. Gabriel is a fool to have risked an empire for a woman. Say your prayers, Serena. Crash. The reinforced floor-to-ceiling windows facing the balcony didn't just break, they detonated inward. A hail of safety glass rained down on the living room as 2 stun grenades rolled across the floor, erupting in blinding flashes of magnesium light and deafening noise. Donovan stumbled backward, crying out, shielding his eyes and dropping his grip on Serena's arm. Through the billowing smoke and shattered glass stepped a nightmare. Gabriel hadn't bothered with the compromised elevators. He and his team had scaled the maintenance shafts and rappelled from the roof. He was covered in rain and glass dust, an automatic rifle gripped tightly against his shoulder. His eyes were completely black, stripped of any humanity, radiating a lethal, predatory fury. Before the remaining mercenary could even raise his weapon, Gabriel fired 2 precise, silenced shots. The man crumpled. Donovan, half blinded and panicking, raised his pistol toward Gabriel. Gabriel didn't even flinch. He walked forward, stepping over the debris, and fired a single shot. The bullet shattered Donovan's right kneecap. Donovan screamed, collapsing onto the ruined rug, dropping his weapon. He clutched his bleeding leg, writhing in agony. Gabriel. Wait, Donovan begged, hyperventilating as Gabriel stood over him, the barrel of the rifle aiming down at his chest. I can explain. The Korsakovs are dead, Gabriel interrupted, his voice a chilling, hollow void. By dawn, Yuri and his lieutenants will be ash. And you, Donovan, you will spend the rest of your very long, agonizing life in a soundproof basement under Pier 40. Wishing I had killed you tonight. Gabriel kicked Donovan's pistol away and gestured to Elias, who had just breached the front doors with the rest of the team. Take the trash out. Elias dragged the screaming, bleeding Donovan out of the penthouse, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind them. Suddenly, the adrenaline left Gabriel's body. The gun dropped from his hands, clattering to the floor. He rushed across the room, falling to his knees beside Serena. Serena, he breathed, his hands hovering over her, terrified to touch her, terrified he might break her further. The ruthless mafia boss was completely gone, replaced by a man looking at his entire world bleeding on the floor. Are you hurt? Did he? Serena pushed herself up with her good arm, ignoring the ringing in her ears, and threw herself into his chest. She buried her face in his neck, inhaling the scent of rain, gunpowder, and sandalwood. I'm here, she cried softly, her tears soaking his ruined suit. I'm right here. Gabriel's arms wrapped around her, fierce and protective, burying his face in her dark curls. You're never leaving my sight again, he whispered into her hair, kissing her temple with desperate reverence. Never again. The morning sun over Manhattan was blinding, piercing through the temporary security shutters that Gabriel's men had installed over the shattered balcony windows. The storm that had raged through the night, both outside and within the walls of the penthouse, had finally broken. Serena woke to the soft hum of the city far below. She was lying in a massive, king-sized bed draped in heavy silk sheets. For a terrifying second, her mind flashed back to the fluorescent lights of the emergency room, the agonizing twist of Nathaniel's hands, and the cold barrel of Donovan's gun. She gasped, trying to sit up, but a sharp, burning ache in her left forearm anchored her firmly to reality. Her arm was elevated on a plush velvet pillow. The sleek fiberglass cast a stark reminder of the price she had paid for her secrets. Easy, querida. The voice was a low, soothing rumble from the corner of the room. Gabriel was sitting in a leather armchair near the window. He had finally discarded the ruined charcoal suit, dressed now in a simple black Henley that stretched across his broad chest and dark slacks. He looked exhausted. The shadows beneath his dark eyes spoke of a man who hadn't slept a single second, who had spent the entire night tearing down the pillars of the city's underworld. Gabriel, Serena breathed, her voice raspy. She leaned back against the headboard, her deep brown skin glowing in the morning light. Is it over? Gabriel stood up, walking slowly to the edge of the bed. He didn't sit immediately, as if he felt he didn't have the right to invade her space. Instead, he poured a glass of water from the nightstand carafe and handed it to her good hand. Drink, he urged gently. Wait until she swallowed the cool water, he finally answered. Yes, it is over. Serena looked at him, searching his aristocratic features for any lingering trace of the ruthless monster she had seen in the living room the night before. But his eyes were clear, focused entirely on her well-being. What happened after Donovan? Gabriel let out a heavy sigh, sitting on the very edge of the mattress. The flash drive you secured was the key to everything. While you slept, Elias and our tech division decrypted the ledger. It wasn't just a list of Vanguard Equity's offshore accounts. It contained the exact shipping routes, the corrupt customs officials Yuri Korsakov was paying off, and the physical locations of their armories in Brooklyn and Queens. He reached out, his warm fingers lightly tracing the edge of her cast, careful not to apply even an ounce of pressure. By 4 a.m., my men had seized their shipments at the docks. By 5 a.m., anonymous packages containing Yuri's most damning financial records were hand-delivered to the FBI field office, the IRS, and the district attorney. The Korsakov syndicate is entirely bankrupt and structurally dismantled. Yuri is currently sitting in federal custody, and Nathaniel Pierce has simply ceased to exist on paper. They will never touch you again. Serena closed her eyes, a profound, heavy relief washing over her. The crushing weight of the anxiety she had carried for 2 grueling years, the constant paranoia, the fake smiles she had given Nathaniel, the terror of being discovered finally began to dissolve. And Donovan? She asked softly. A dark, dangerous shadow flickered across Gabriel's face, a fleeting glimpse of the apex predator. Donovan Sterling spent 30 years at my father's side, and 5 years at mine. He knew our defenses better than anyone. He believed that if he could break my heart, he could break my mind, and swoop in to take the throne while I was distracted by grief. He underestimated you, Serena. He thought you were just a civilian to be scared away. He didn't realize he had created my greatest operative. Gabriel's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. He is currently residing in a very deep, very secure location. He will spend the rest of his natural life answering for what he did to your arm. Silence fell over the bedroom, thick and heavy with the things left unsaid. Serena looked down at her lap. I should have told you, Gabriel, when Donovan first approached me, when he threatened to feed your operations to the feds. I should have come straight to you. But he had photos. He had schedules. He showed me how deeply he had infiltrated your inner circle. If I had warned you, I knew he would have killed you before you could act. You did the only thing you could to protect me, Gabriel interrupted, his voice thick with raw emotion. He shifted closer, taking her uninjured right hand in both of his. He brought her knuckles to his lips, pressing a lingering, desperate kiss against her skin. You walked into the lion's den. You sat across from Nathaniel Pierce every day, knowing that if you slipped up even once, it would mean your life. You sacrificed your identity, your career, your peace of mind, and you sacrificed us. I never stopped loving you, Serena whispered, tears finally pooling in her eyes, spilling over her dark lashes. Every night in that tiny, terrible apartment in Queens, I thought about the life we were supposed to have. I thought about the wedding. I thought about your smile. I am the one who failed you, Gabriel said fiercely, his grip tightening. I brought you into a world of violence and promised I could keep you insulated from it. I built a fortress of money and power, but I left the front door wide open for a traitor. I forced you to become a soldier, Serena. I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone for that. Serena squeezed his hand back, her gaze unwavering. I don't need you to atone, Gabriel. I need you to understand that I am not glass. I am not a fragile thing to be locked away in a high tower. If I am going to be your wife, I am going to stand beside you, not behind you. No more secrets. No more insulating me from the truth of what you do. We rule your empire together, or I walk away for real this time. Gabriel stared at her, utterly captivated by the fierce, unyielding fire in her eyes. The woman sitting before him was not the naive art curator he had fallen in love with 3 years ago. She was a survivor. She was a tactician who had single-handedly orchestrated the downfall of his greatest enemies from a cubicle at a money laundering front. She was his absolute equal. Slowly, Gabriel reached into the pocket of his slacks. He pulled out a small, familiar object that made Serena's breath catch in her throat. It was her engagement ring, the flawless, 4-carat emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. The ring she had left sitting on his nightstand the night she disappeared. I have carried this in my pocket every single day for 2 years, Gabriel confessed, his voice trembling slightly, stripping away the last remnants of the stoic Mafia boss to reveal the devoted man underneath. I used it as a reminder of what I had lost, and what I had to find again. He didn't ask the question. They had already moved past the need for proposals. Instead, he carefully, reverently slid the cold platinum band back onto the ring finger of her right hand, since her left was obscured by the cast. It fit perfectly, just as it always had. No more secrets, Gabriel vowed, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that burned. My money, my men, my life. They belong to you, Serena. And God help anyone who ever forgets it. Serena smiled, genuine and bright, the warmth radiating all the way to her chest. She pulled him down by the collar of his shirt, closing the distance between them. Their kiss was a desperate collision of relief, passion, and 2 years of starved longing. It tasted of salt, of survival, and of a brand new beginning. Outside the shattered windows of the penthouse, the city of New York stretched out in all its chaotic glory. But inside, the syndicate had been cleansed, the ghosts had been laid to rest, and Gabriel Ahn finally had his world back in his arms. Serena's shattered arm became the catalyst that saved an empire. By infiltrating a rival syndicate, she risked everything to protect the man she loved. Gabriel didn't just seek revenge. He dismantled his enemies overnight, proving his ruthless devotion. In the end, the ex-fiancée he thought he lost returned not as a runaway bride, but as the undisputed queen of New York's vast underworld, bound by loyalty, survival, and fierce love.